Hello, Edwina. Murphy-Droomer is my name, and I want to warmly welcome you to this interview in the series where I am speaking to phenomenal feminine entrepreneurs, looking at their life-changing ideas and insights on how we take control of our future, our prosperity, and our freedom. Today, I am beyond excited to introduce you to Rachel Pedersen. Rachel, you came to my on my radar via a mutual friend, Bart, who has glowingly sung your praises for over a year. So the fact that we get to connect now and I get to learn more about your story and share you with our audience is just such an honor. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I think we're going to have a great time. And part of the reason I'm here is because our mutual friend Bart sings your praises as well. So I'm so excited that we get to connect.
It's fun. It's fun. So, Rachel, you have so many beautiful stories, but I think if we can just start for those in our audience that haven't come across you until now, if we can start with, like that, your journey, I know started quite young when you were, the bubbling entrepreneurial woman was bubbling inside you from an early age. But just if we can start looking at the journey that brought you to where you are now.
For sure. We could go all the way back, but we won't. We'll talk about 10 years ago. I was actually a single mom on welfare and living out of one bedroom with my daughter, Dakota. And what's really interesting about that season, why does this play into my journey today? That was the season where resourcefulness was built, appreciation for opportunities, understanding the power of connections and chance encounters and being able to meet people. Just a couple years after that, I actually met my husband, and we might talk about this, but 13 days later, we got married. And it's a wild roller coaster. It's been so much fun. But over the last 6 years, I've been building this business thanks to the support, the emotional support of my husband. We've had 2 kids. So now I'm a mom of 3. I run 2 businesses and I'm located in Minnesota. So there's a lot to unpack, I think, in there.
There is so much to unpack, but I think, what I know from, what it takes to build these kind of businesses, the fact that you had I love the word audacity to meet and marry a man in such a short amount of time just shows that ability to grab onto certainty and run with it. So let's start with that story because it's so good.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite stories. So I had actually just gotten out of a long relationship that was serious and it was looking like it was going to become potentially engagement and marriage. I know he had bought a ring, but it wasn't working out. And so I broke off that relationship, and someone who I was close friends with was like, you need to come to Bible study on Wednesday. There's someone I've got to introduce you to. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to meet anyone. She goes, well, he's really cute. And I was like, oh, I still don't know. And she goes, here's a hint. We could be sister-in-laws. Yeah. And why that was so cool is because our kids were best friends. And fast forward to today, our kids are now cousins and best friends. And someone who started as my friend is now my sister-in-law. But I went to Bible study. I met the really cute guy and he was really great. And we just hit it off immediately. And we hung out almost every single day for the next week. And 7 days after we met, he looks at me over dinner and he goes, I'm in love with you. And I was like, I know, me too. I'm totally in love with you too. And it was such a relief because I was like, how am I going to play this cool? Have you ever had those experiences where you're like, how am I going to play this cool? I don't know. What if it totally slips?
Yep.
So he was all in and I was too. And he's like, I think you're my wife. I was like, I know, I think so too. So that night we started looking up flights to Vegas to see if we could elope over the next week. And we didn't have enough money. So we couldn't elope to Vegas, but we told our friends and family, we met the one, this is it. We're going to get married in 6 months. We'll have a very calm, small ceremony. And people weren't as happy as we thought they would be. They were, rightfully so, very nervous. And they even held interventions. They were like, you can't get married in 6 months. It's too fast. So on Monday night, I called my husband, Paul, and I said, I wanted to wait 6 months just for everyone else's sake. Do you just want to get married tomorrow? He says, let's do it. And we eloped at the Chapel of Love at the Mall of America behind a desk. And it was awesome. That was almost 8 years ago.
It's amazing. One of the questions that I ask in the book is, whose voices do you tune into for inspiration? Because it's such a big piece of how we make decisions. And I know, I've got a story that I shared with you briefly. I met my husband, we had 3 days together. I was a single mum of 4 kids. And then we built this relationship over Skype, but the people around me, my sister and people were just like, Edwina, what are you thinking? What are you doing? But it's been and is the most magical relationship imaginable. My parents knew each other for 6 weeks and got engaged. Her family made her wait for 3 months to get married, but they were married for over 40 years before my dad died. It was magic. So it's just, being so careful of the voices that we allow to influence the decisions we make is a big piece of the entrepreneurial journey as well. So who are the people that you tune in to pull you up when you're feeling uncertain? Have you got particular people that you listen to?
There are. I will say that they change from time to time, but there are a couple voices that almost never change. So one is my husband, Paul. So he's like a rock. He's there's this song actually that Bart turned me on to, and it's about a balloon and a string, and it's really beautiful. And it talks about how one person like wants to fly high and go on adventures and do all kinds of crazy things, and one person's like, I'm just gonna be here and keep us on the course, and you'll come back down when you're ready. And Paul is that. And it sounds negative to say like a string to my balloon, but it's like he keeps me from floating away into the stratosphere,
Yeah.
And so Paul is one, absolutely. My assistant, Kellyanne, is actually one of my closest friends. And it's funny because like we wouldn't be in each other's weddings or anything, but we've known each other for 13 years. And when things are tough, we go to each other and we check in and we have each other's backs all the time. And it's interesting because I don't think I've ever said that out loud before, but she's really one of those voices that I deeply respect and admire. And then I know this is weird, but sometimes I really like to tune into like, what do I think the future version of myself would say? What do I think the best, most aligned version of me would say? And obviously we can't ever know for sure, except whenever I ask, I get really good advice. And so I know that it's never steered me wrong.
Yeah. I had a performance coach a year or 2 ago, and she used to get me to journal to my higher self. So I gave my higher self at my absolute best version a name, and I would have these back and forth conversations. And her name is Sophia, which is wisdom. But I named my beautiful painting in the background, I named her Sophia because she's sort of elegant, which I love, but she's also this Mother Nature, which is that earthy but other piece of who I am. So I have little conversations with Sophia.
I love that. I love it.
It's a great tactic. It's really good listening to that inner voice first.
Absolutely. Then one other thing that I do, and this changes from time to time, whenever I'm struggling with something in particular and I can't find the answers, I love to bring in mentors that I respect. And I don't usually stay with a mentor for very long because I feel like once I've worked with them for a while, I hear their voice in my head and I can usually assume what they're going to say. But I love to bring in people who have already walked a path that I have, or to bring out a better version of myself. And so I've worked with a lot of really great mentors whose advice I respect and who I take action on.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly wouldn't be where I am in my business without those people as well.
Agreed.
So I love to start with vision, and I know that that's something that you do in quite a unique way, but I just find that it is the piece between where we are now and where we want to be. So could you dive into how you use vision and what your tools are to create the vision of where you want to go?
For sure. My first real experience with creating vision was when I was a single mom. Or rather in the process of becoming a single mom, which was a very difficult season. And I remember like Dakota, my baby, she was so colicky. And so she would only fall asleep. And I was living in a studio apartment. So but it was kitchen, dining room, living room, bedroom, all one room. And that was so challenging with a baby. I don't recommend it. But she was sleeping in my arm because otherwise she wouldn't fall asleep. And I would just lay there staring at her and tears would stream down my face. And during that season, I was like, I didn't logically say this, but I started to play a game of pretend. And I imagined that I was going to win the lottery.
Yeah.
And I can just tell you that in that season of life, that vision kept me going. It kept me waking up, kept me moving forward. And I would imagine everything, every detail. Oh, I was going to get hair extensions and a fancy car, and like everything was going to be fixed. It was so exciting. And I would imagine it in such detail that it kept me moving forward. And in fact, sometimes my friends and family would say, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What am I going to do with my life? I'm going to win the lottery." And I really believed it. But what I was actually doing and not realizing it at the time was I was practicing the art of vision, belief, and honestly, I don't want to say manifesting necessarily, but going after exactly what you want. Because we kind of built our own lottery, which is kind of wild. So now it's something I try to tune into every day. And some days I get to it. And some days life and our kids are young and some days are unpredictable, but I try to tap into vision every day where I get some time to sit down. I close my eyes. I put a little fancy crystal mask on, but I put on music or a track that helps you to visualize what you want. And I just have to say, every day I do it, I swear magic happens. I imagine every single detail, and then I walk through my house and I write what I want as though it already were.
It's happened. Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. So you don't use a vision board as such. You just use goals and write things down.
I do, but for most people, I recommend vision boards. This is an interesting thing because people are always like, "Wait, you don't have a vision board?" And I'm like, "No, my mind's eye is better." But I don't have an internal dialogue. Do you have an internal monologue or dialogue? Like, do you hear a voice narrating your thoughts?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have that. And I thought no one else did. And so I see videos and pictures, like clear as day, videos and pictures, and there's no sound. So when I create a vision board in my mind, it is like clear as day. So I walk around with a vision board. But if you don't have that, I 10 out of 10 recommend a vision board. But if I write words around my house and goals, I can look at those words and instantly my internal vision board pops in.
Yeah. I think in pictures, but there's definitely a monologue that goes with it.
That's kind of fun. That's best of both worlds, right?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it in those details before.
Yeah.
Interesting. So with the women that are tuning into this series, there are people that are just on that cusp of jumping in feet first to the entrepreneurial world, and there are people that have certainly started on their journey. And I just think it is so valuable to hear how you went from the early stages to becoming a social media queen, which you do now. And I know when I was starting this, I imagined that I was going to be working, my background is naturopathy and functional nutrition. I was going to be teaching people about food, and I had it all mapped out, and it was, like I needed all the pieces in place, and that didn't work. But how did you move in those early stages to starting into becoming a social media queen?
Oh man, I feel like it was a lot of little small steps, lots of little pivots.
Yeah.
So, my first push into this business was as a social media manager. A lot of things changed. So originally I imagined I would have, a fancy office with a team of 500 people, and we'd all have those beautiful glass walls, and it would just be divine. I think we all at some point kind of romanticize that just a little. What's interesting is that I started to realize it's very easy to market other people. It's very easy, so much easier, because you take all of the doubt, the fear, the insecurity, the putting your life's worth on the line, putting your purpose on the line, putting your heart on the line, your vulnerability. And I'll be honest with you, things didn't explode until I started putting all those things on the line every single day for myself.
Yeah.
And we had success after success for clients, but meanwhile, it didn't quite feel the same as building our own thing. And so it started with it's almost like Joseph Campbell, the cave that you fear most to enter is the one that holds the treasure you most desire. And that was exactly what I wanted, was to build a huge platform where I could help to put a new message out there, a new wave of thought or something different. And it required me getting really, really, really vulnerable. And that was kind of scary, but along the way it worked.
Yeah. I think it's your willingness to be so authentic and vulnerable that just keeps me coming back to watch what you're up to next, because it creates so many opportunities for conversation, which is really what we're supposed to be doing on social media, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And naturally, I think so this is an interesting story. One of my clients is Dean Graciosi. And when his team reached out, they were like, we watched all of your TikToks. And I was like, no. And I had this panic moment because I was like, that is the place where I'm even like more myself. Everything. And I just kept thinking like, oh my gosh, are they going to hire me in spite of all of this? Like, this is everything. And when I got to go, fly to Arizona to go train their team in, they were like, no, we hired you because of that. They said, everyone thinks it's in spite of, or that you have to hide that. No, that's why we wanted to work with you.
Yeah. I've seen the training that you've done inside their course, and it's amazing, by the way.
Yeah. It was awesome.
I think you were the perfect choice.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it is. And this is where, I grew up with a very, like a very strict rule book. My mother was all about appearances and all about what would the neighbors think first, as opposed to how you're feeling. And that's how she was raised. That's what she knows. So the more that I can lean into people like you, there's the Ashley Grahams of the world and people that are just so magically authentic and real, the more it helps me. And I just really want the people listening to hear this message, to really understand that social media is a place to share real stories, is a place to be authentic, because there's a lot of polish, and the polish actually doesn't draw me in. It looks pretty, but it's not the stories I want to listen to. And, I think that's something that you do so beautifully. So maybe you're going to actually articulate that more than others, because the social media is a place that a lot of us feel very apprehensive to hang out. We watch and scroll through things. We're there a lot, but sharing. Yeah. So maybe if we look at, do you have a little bit of a guide, a way that you can support people who maybe have started an Instagram page, let's go with Instagram, and just want to know if they've got a bubbling idea about, I'm actually a rock star at making lunchboxes, or I'm a gem at finding the perfect things in an op shop, or, they may seem like random ideas, but all these things can become businesses now. Where do you recommend people start with sharing their ideas?
I'm going to give a few different tips. And what's interesting is these are pretty universal. So I look at social media differently than how most people would think that I look at it. I'm active on every platform, and I do not recommend that for most people. It is a ton of work. It's what we're supposed to do, though. It's our expertise. Just like I always have kind of cool hair because I used to be a hairstylist, but I don't expect that everyone else always have cool braids and buns and random things like that. Okay, so number one, pick one or two platforms and focus there. Don't try to be active everywhere or you will burn out. Number two, pick consistency over frequency. Maybe one rock solid post per day. Just start with one a day or 3 to 5 a week. That totally works. Start there and just focus on that consistency so you don't get burned out day after day. Number three, you've been researching already. And most of us think like, oh, I'm going to have to research. No, you've been scrolling on social media. You've been researching for years.
Yeah.
So as crazy as this sounds, actually shut out the noise and get to creating. One of the best things you can do is put content out there and allow the response, AKA, does it do well? Does it bring some new followers? And if it doesn't, maybe pivot a little bit or just keep going to be kind of the indication of how something's working.
Yeah.
And number 4, this is so important. Do not listen to the naysayers, especially when you're starting, especially as you build. Like, don't listen to them ever, because people will always look for a reason to tell you why it wasn't just right according to their mind. Remember that every criticism is really almost always like a reflection of how that person feels about themselves.
Yeah. Well, you're the master at starting conversations and getting people thinking, with your willingness to share different conversations. And I think, if we can find 1 or 2 people or 3 or 4 that are sharing content that is applicable to or in line with the sort of stuff that we want to be sharing, is that, I know there's such a big conversation around not wanting to copy, but you can grab inspiration from people. Is that something that you kind of look at?
I do, in moderation. There's an amazing book called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon.
Yeah.
And it is wonderful because he explains in it different artists, creators, inventors' takes on reinvention and how to content model. And I love the way that they explain it. They're explaining that you don't plagiarize, you don't steal, you don't copy,
Yeah.
but you can get super inspired by things. And honestly, anyone who's a great creator, great artist, great inventor is going to be like, wow, that's impressive. I'm so glad that I inspired someone to create something similar. But then the other thing that you have to be careful of is to not spend too much time looking at other people's content, because it can actually pull you away from your main focus, which is getting your thing out there.
Yeah, it is distracting. I found that as well. It was a big thing that made a difference for me, is that, it slows down some of the comparison mode stuff that can come up as well.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Yeah. So, all right, so let's look at, obviously you've created somewhat of an empire now inside what you've done, and the effect that that's had on your life. I know that, a big part of your vision was wanting to step away from having a boss and relying on a paycheck and those sort of things. So what has being an entrepreneur, how has that actually affected your life?
Okay, so there's so many ways that being an entrepreneur has positively affected my life. And then there are a lot of areas where, especially having kids, it hasn't affected anything in a good way. So for example, on a Tuesday, I might get verified by a major platform that I'm super excited about. And that evening, my kid's still like, Mom, change my diaper. It doesn't, it doesn't change most of the day-to-day in family and parent life. What it has helped me to do is it's helped me to learn how to step away from work, as interestingly as that sounds, to set my own hours, to figure out when enough is enough, to create balance. There's a lot of integration. I will be honest about that, especially as we're in activities season where 2 of the 3 kids have activities. It's positively benefited my marriage, because one of the big things we didn't expect when I started these companies was that my husband and I were going to instantly be thrown into the opposite of the traditional roles. And that meant I was going to be the breadwinner and he was going to be taking on a lot of the traditionally female roles in a house. And that took some adjusting. That took a lot of adjusting. And I'm so grateful that Paul is who he is, because we learned to communicate through it and we've learned how to flex with each other and for each other and say, hey, I've got dinner. Hey, I've got breakfast. Hey, there's this, parent teacher conference. Can you make it? And we've communicated about a lot, but especially in our society, it's weird sometimes. And there are some funny conversations that come when people assume that, Paul's the breadwinner and I'm a I'm a trophy wife, which is kind of funny. But those assumptions do happen. It's also helped us to become not pickier, but more careful about who our friends are, and making sure that the people we surround ourselves with are kind and loving and encouraging and dreamers. And even if they don't have their own businesses, which many of our friends don't, are able to have positive, constructive conversations. It's changed a lot in our lives, but at the same time, it also hasn't changed a lot of the things in the household, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's, I mean, that was a big piece of, the journey that I went on when I became an entrepreneur, was because when my husband moved here, my now husband moved from South Africa, he actually took on the financial care of myself and my 4 kids. It was quite unbelievable. He's an amazingly generous man. But I was like, I am not going to allow this situation to continue. It was really a very solid why behind why I built the business that I have, was because I wanted to be able to take over that and allow him much more freedom in his life and to be the one that's paying the bills. It feels good. It feels really good.
It really does. I didn't know that about your journey. That's an intense season, isn't it? Having to get used to something totally different.
Yeah, but it is, having that strong why. I mean, everybody talks about it. We've got amazing books around it, but I think it is, if you don't have that really strong why underneath you when you're doing this work, it would be easy for it to not, to give up.
Yep, absolutely. Wow.
So have you got a new why now? Does your why evolve?
I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think most people experience that. One of the biggest changes, and this was a weird one, was when we started making more than enough money. And I'll be honest, we aren't mansion living people. We're not yacht, private jet living people. I'm not trying to create a designer shoe collection, and I have no judgment towards anyone who does, because shoes are awesome. But what's interesting is we got to this point where I was like, wow, there's nothing that changes from here. There's nothing big that changes from here. And that's a very interesting moment. And I will say, I wish I had been prepared for it's like a season of wandering afterwards, until you discover a bigger, better why, or a why that can propel you once you're taken care of. It's a total shift from survival to thrival. I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
So that journey was intense, and I felt very lost for a little bit. And then one day it really hit me, and it was so clear that no matter what we do, whether it's social media or TV shows or writing books or creating products that help businesses grow their social media, our job is to help people feel loved. And social media is a form of building love if you equip the right people with the tools to reach the masses. So realizing that above and beyond everything else, I want people to feel love and spread love. Social media is just the coolest vehicle in the world for it. So that was a huge shift. Did you experience that too? That almost like redefinition of your why?
Yeah. Yes, it has. My why sort of shifted not so long ago, because I fulfilled the why in taking over financial responsibility for myself and my kids. But now my kids are at the other end. I've got my number 3 is going to be 18 this month. So I've only got one left in school, one child left. But my new why is feeling really confident that I've got the money to give my older kids when they need it. And that becomes a bigger expense. So my second daughter had a car accident a little while ago, and she was strapped, and I wanted to be in a position to really help her a lot more. So, that has shifted my why now.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it feels good. So you touched on the whole, mansions and yachts. Sorry, my voice is going. And the whole, mansions and yachts and that image of what a rich life looks like. But I love looking at, to me, a rich life is actually living in the country and gumboots and mud and a beautiful garden full of roses. And, that's my rich life picture. What's your rich life picture? What does it look like?
My rich life picture is a house on a lake.
Yep.
I love lakes. I love beaches. I like oceans. I say lake because it's Minnesota based and we have tons of lakes and not even close to ocean.
Yeah.
A library filled with tons of great books, all
Yes.
And
does it have one of those sliding ladders? That's one of my.
Absolutely. Yes. Like Beauty and the Beast, right? You got Belle on the sliding ladder.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the word that comes to mind is just cozy. I'm a big cozy person. I like blankets and sweaters. I like being warm. We do fires in our fireplace several times a week. And when our friends come over, we have the comfiest couch. It feels like almost like a marshmallow. Like you sit on it, you're like, oh, everyone always does. I love just piling everyone onto this oversized couch and having cozy nights in. And some people read and some people watch movies and we play games. That's a very, very rich life for me. Just cozy and happy and full of love.
Yeah. That is so my picture as well. But I add to that being able to wander outside and pick fruit off my fruit trees and veggies out of my garden. And, that's the other piece of that picture. I actually love chopping wood. So for a fire, give me an axe. I'm actually...
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm well and truly a country chick at heart. That's my idea of, and a good ride on mower.
I love this.
So let's, it's funny, this vision of the library and the sliding ladder. My second daughter, Zoe, one of the first vision boards I did with her, she had a picture like that on her vision board. And I was like, oh. So I know in alignment with your love of books, you have a book club. Tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, we started it just about, I want to say 9 months ago.
Yeah.
I've loved books my whole life. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago that I randomly saw the president of the Forbes 30 Under 30 on LinkedIn. And I got super gutsy and I just decided to message him. And I was like, let's hop on a call. And he agreed. So we hopped on a phone call and I was just like, what advice do you have for me? Here's my backstory. I would love to know, like, what do you recommend based on the success you've seen of the people around you? And he said, Rachel, this is going to be such unconventional advice, but read one book a week for the rest of your life. Because most people read on average 4 books a year. He said, so in 1 year, you will read 10 times the number of books as normal people do in a year. And he said, they won't even be able to catch up and you will know things about everything. He said, just read. And today I read about 2 to 3 books a week. And that's great. And I don't recommend that most people read that much. It's just a passion. But I do recommend that most people read more. I recommend that most people read a book a month. Start there, see how that goes. So I created this book club to see if other people wanted to read the books that grab my interest, nonfiction specifically. There's tons of book clubs for fiction, which is really fun.
Yeah.
But nonfiction, business, marketing, personal development, self-help, skills, communication, leadership. We read those types of books every single month. And today we have 5,800 people and we all read these books together every single month. And I'm obsessed with it. It's my hobby.
So do you have a Facebook group where people are talking about the book as you read through it? Is that,
Yeah. It's called Rachel Pedersen's Monthly Book Club. It's super, it's super on the money as to what it is. Rachel Pedersen's Monthly Book Club. It's just a Facebook group and there's no upsell that you can't pay more to be a part of it if you want. And pretty soon here, we're actually going to be doing a weekly podcast that's book club members only too. So just to talk further about the books. I'm obsessed.
Yeah. So talking to the authors or other people that are reading it?
That would be one of the goals. 1 month we got one of the authors to send several signed copies. So Jay Shetty sent several signed copies and that was really exciting.
Amazing.
And we want to keep reaching out to the authors. So far, I haven't gotten ahead. I've been very intuitive about the book I want, and I'll pick it like the night before announcement. But at some point, I want to bring the authors onto the podcast. I think that would be amazing.
Yeah. I'll be in there. I'll be there. What book are you reading at the moment, just out of curiosity?
We just finished up Limitless by Jim Quick. Phenomenal book. And we are diving into Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And it is heavy.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. I know that you have a lovely gift for our audience. Did you want to take a second to tell them what that is?
For sure. So one of the things that I find really interesting is I found that certain themes don't really disappear as you build your platform, right? And as success happens, oftentimes I'll get into a room with people who do millions or even billions of dollars, and they're still nervous, insecure, trying to figure out where they belong. That's what so many of us are doing. And I started to realize that as you grow, things like imposter syndrome don't necessarily go away. They just become less common.
Yeah.
So I realized almost everyone experiences some level of imposter syndrome. And I put together, I think it's 27 strategies for busting through imposter syndrome. And these are the strategies that I've used that have helped me, ways to overcome it quickly, ways to root it out for longer. And it's been super helpful. So 27 strategies for saying goodbye to imposter syndrome, at least for a little bit longer in between each session.
Yeah, that's awesome. I talk about, and so valuable, and a conversation that I just hear with all the women I work with, whether they're paying clients or emails that I get. This is not good. I call it not good enough syndrome.
Yep.
Is it the same thing?
Totally. And I think it creeps into everything we do. Am I good enough as a mom? Am I good enough as a CEO? Am I good enough as a content creator? Am I good enough in the swimsuit? Please tell me yes. And so I think it does come up, and I think one of its faces, that not good enough, and I love that that's what you called it. One of the faces of that is imposter syndrome, but you're spot on, Edwina. Like, the question is, am I good enough?
Yeah. And yes, you are, to everybody listening. So if you were to describe what you see when you look at somebody and you go, my goodness, she is a phenomenal woman, what do you see?
She's authentic and she's kind.
Yeah.
She is generous, not just financially, and not even necessarily financially. She shows up whether she's confident or not. She just shows up, whatever that looks like. And then for me, phenomenal also means that we have some fun too. So she likes to have fun. She likes to laugh, or she likes to hang out or be up for adventure.
I'm so grateful to you for this conversation, for making the time, Rachel. I cannot encourage everybody strongly enough to tune in and watch how you do social media, because I do see you as the social media queen. Amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy and honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to have to edit the end off that. There we go.